Hello, guys. Welcome back to the MMA Sucka Podcast. As always, I'm Frazer Krohn, and as you can probably tell just from the intro now, I am far more entertained by the wonders that are combat sports this past weekend. Obviously, last weekend and last week on last week's podcast, I had a little bit of a rant, a little bit of a moan about the state of, in particular, the UFC and the sheer volume of fight night cards that we're having and their quality overall. But I did say that look, this weekend we've got a really good UFC fight night card from live from Atlantic City, and it delivered in a big way. I'm going to go on to talk about that later, and I'm going to go on to preview this upcoming weekend's um, fight night card. Yes, I do believe it's from the Apex again. It is what it is. It's quite a good fight card. There's lots of storylines throughout the card itself, and it's a competitive, logical main event. Um, First things first, I just want to quickly touch on the boxing. Um, Last night we got a British domestic card. Ben Whittaker picked up a win. Vidal Riley picked up a big win. Alan Babbage got back in the win column. Couldn't care less about that. But the main event, Frazer Clark versus Fabio Wardley, I think it's for the British heavyweight title. What a war! If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. Two big heavyweights slugging it out for 36 minutes. We had points deducted. We had a knockdown. We had, Fabio Wardley was bloody and beaten after the fight. I'll tell you the result now. It was a split draw, but that just goes to tell you how competitive the fight is. One of the best all British heavyweight fights that we've seen in recent memory. One of the best heavyweight fights of the year, in my opinion. Those two guys will inevitably rematch. A lot of respect between the two guys, but I just wanted to touch on the boxing because it was such a good fight. Like I said, guys, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It was live on Sky Sports, free to air, so it wasn't a pay-per-view bout. The whole card was pretty strong from top to bottom, but Fabio Wardley and Frazer Clark put on an absolute showcase in the main event. And like I said, go back and watch it, guys, because it's definitely worth a rewatch. Um, but for me, this weekend was all about UFC Fight Night Atlantic City, where in the main event we had Manon Fiorot versus Erin Blanchfield. Again, I'll touch on it like I did a little bit at the beginning and like I did last week. This is a fight that made sense as a main event. You've got two women on really long winning runs, an exciting clash of styles. You had a competitive nature between the fight, a fight that made sense, and a fight where the repercussions actually mattered. We're looking at the winner of this fight probably fighting their next fight for the flyweight title. And the winner of this fight was Manon Fiorot, France's Manon Fiorot. That's why I'm wearing the PSG shirt. My French sister, Manon Fiorot, absolutely dominates Erin Blanchfield across 5 rounds. I think the official scorecards, let me just pull them up here because I don't want to do Manon Fiorot the dirty 50-45 on all scorecards for what, she entered the fight as an underdog for what was supposed to be a very, very close fight. Manon Fiorot absolutely battered, dominated, and humbled in a way Erin Blanchfield. Nothing against Erin Blanchfield as a fighter. I still think she'll be a champion one day. She's what, 24, 25 years old. Manon Fiorot, she's got about 9-10 years experience on her. But I alluded to this. I can't remember if I alluded to it on the podcast or I alluded to it in my betting piece where I did pick Manon Fiorot by unanimous decision. Granted, I was very split on this fight. I did pick Erin Blanchfield in the MMASucka picks, but on my betting piece, I said go with Manon Fiorot by unanimous decision. I just felt that her experience at the highest level was far more than Erin Blanchfield. Now, Erin Blanchfield has beaten two probably top girls in Talia Santos last time out, which was, I think it was a closer fight than people were remembering. It was a close fight. She did win by unanimous decision, but it was a close fight, and that was over 3 rounds. And then she beat Jessica Andrade in the main event. Jessica Andrade took that fight on pretty short notice. That was supposed to be the Talia Santos main event, which Talia Santos pulled out of. Jessica Andrade stepped in, and Erin Blanchfield beat her. But what we saw was a great fight that made a lot of sense. Like I said, But Manon Fiorot proved that you can win a fight fighting on the back foot. You don't always have to be the aggressor in this one, because you were just picking off Erin Blanchfield, especially with that check right hook. She was far too good for Erin Blanchfield on the feet. She showed in that first round, despite the fact that she was caught in that guillotine choke in the first round, she showed that, you know, that she's a mixed martial artist, that the threat of the takedown was there. She looked good on the ground when it did hit the ground. Granted, it didn't hit the ground all that often because Erin Blanchfield wasn't able to get it to the ground. But when the fight did hit the ground, Manon Fiorot showed some good reversals on the ground, but it was on the feet that she did her best work. She had that lightning, laser jab straight to the point, as it were. She was really, really good with it. She didn't throw too many kicks because with the fear of being taken down. Bisping commented on that in on the commentary. I thought Bisping and Felder did a phenomenal job on commentary this week in particular. But I think what was obvious was that Manon Fiorot was just too big and too powerful for Erin Blanchfield. There was a point, I think it was in the third or the fourth round, where Blanchfield sort of tried to get Manon Fiorot into a clinch, and Fiorot literally just pushed her away. I think that was in the third round. She just pushed her away into the fence. She got a big sister, a big brother to her, as it were, and just showed, look, I'm stronger than you, I'm bigger than you, I'm more powerful than you, and I'm better than you on the feet tonight. Long term, if these two ladies rematch in a few years, will it be the same result? We can't say that for sure, but last night showed that Manon Fiorot is one of the best 2 to 3 flyweights in the world, in my opinion. What I thought was really interesting, there was two things that I picked out about this fight in particular. Before round, I had to write it down because I knew I'd forget the round. Before round 4, Erin Blanchfield sat on a stool. A coach was saying, "Look, you've pretty much lost these rounds." And Manon Fiorot was walking around, sort of with a little sort of grin on her face, staring down Erin Blanchfield, proving that she had fitness for 5 full rounds, proving that she was the alpha in there, proving that it was her octagon, and that whatever Erin Blanchfield didn't matter to Manon Fiorot. And that psychologically for Erin Blanchfield and for Manon Fiorot is huge. I really do think, Erin Blanchfield corner was saying I think it was after round 1 or round 2, oh, she's tired. Manon Fiorot, talking about Manon Fiorot, she's tired. She wasn't tired. She wasn't tired. She showed some fatigue in the last round, but she'd been fighting for 23, 24 minutes at the time. She was beginning to show fatigue. And it was a fast-paced bout. Let me just pull up the stats. Yeah. 394 total strikes thrown by Erin Blanchfield, 369 total strikes thrown by Manon Fiorot. Fiorot actually attempted more takedowns than Erin Blanchfield, and we've got to and Erin was credited with no takedowns at all. That first takedown, I think she landed the first takedown she landed. She attempted in I think the first or the second round. She wasn't actually credited with it because she didn't get any control over that one. But what I thought was really interesting is that Manon Fiorot didn't do anything exceptional during the fight. Nothing was, out of the ordinary. She didn't do anything that was, shocking. She didn't, suddenly come out as a karate practitioner. She didn't suddenly, come out as an exclusive boxer. She didn't try and wrestle Erin Blanchfield. She just was really good. She just did everything well throughout the fight. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't exceptional. She just did everything well. Her defense was on point. Her striking was on point. Her fitness was on point. Obviously, strength and conditioning was on point. And that's what she needed to beat Erin Blanchfield. For Erin Blanchfield, I can't lie, I'm a little bit disappointed in Erin Blanchfield. I think she'll be pretty frustrated with herself that she came in with the game plan of, getting close to Manon Fiorot by sort of crash, that sort of crash takedown that we often see is, push forward with a couple of shots, get in the clinch, and then work your takedowns from there. But Fiorot just didn't allow her to do that, and Manon Erin Blanchfield was getting caught every time she sort of crashed forward and looked to sort of scrap with Manon Fiorot. Manon Fiorot was without the back door. Her footwork was on point. It was just, like I said, she didn't do anything exceptionally well. She just did everything really well. And that's what's got her the 50-45 dominant unanimous decision victory. And she's proven herself now to be the next title challenger after this series of tough. Now, I want to go on to talk a little bit about the flyweight division, because for me, the UFC have dropped a ball ever so slightly here. They knew that this fight would happen between Manon Fiorot and Erin Blanchfield. And the winner of the fight was is the logical next number one contender. Now, the trilogy fight between Valentina Shevchenko and the champion Alexa Grasso has to happen. It had to happen. But having them coach a series of tough and then maybe compete after that, we're looking at the end of summer, and they probably will push that back to the Sphere card in September. That means that the regardless of the winner, Manon Fiorot has to be next. And at the end of the day, we're looking at Manon Fiorot maybe not competing until December, January time, depending on how that fight plays. If it's a bloody war, both women were injured after their rematch. If it's like that again, we're looking at Manon Fiorot not competing until December, January next year. It's April 1st today when I'm recording it. That means she'll have almost a year out. She's a year older before she gets to compete for the title. For me, there were other options for fighters to coach tough that could have been far more entertaining. Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya, for example, just comes to mind. I think Tom Aspinall as the interim heavyweight champion, and maybe even Stipe Miocic, maybe somebody else. You've got filming only started recently. Marab and Sean O'Malley. You've got I think multiple different options as to where you could have gone with the tough season, freeing up the flyweight division ever so slightly, and it's forced Manon Fiorot to stall a little bit. Now, will she take a fight in the interim? I don't think so. I think she's far smarter than that. I think her team around her are far smarter than that. But if let's just play devil's advocate, if she was, what fight does she take? And it's got to be Maycee Barber. But for me, with the greatest respect to Maycee Barber, I want to see her versus Rose Namajunas. I don't think Maycee Barber deserves the shot, because we've got Alexa Grasso as the champion, of course, number one contender Valentina Shevchenko, number two ranked Erin Blanchfield, number three ranked Manon Fiorot. Fiorot will now jump ahead of Erin Blanchfield, of course, and she's in sort of purgatory. She's sitting around waiting for that title shot, which is a little bit of it. Like I say, it's a little bit of a disappointment for me, but it is what it is. Let's take nothing away from the phenomenal performance that Manon Fiorot put in Atlantic City. Going into enemy territory as the underdog. Many people expect her to lose, and she not only did she win the fight, but she absolutely dominated the fight from start to finish. Moving on to the co-main event, Joaquin Buckley defeats Vicente Luque by second round TKO. This was a strange one for me, because let's not forget that it was meant to be Vicente Luque versus Sean Brady, I believe. Let me just double check that. But I know that Joaquin Buckley stepped in on not short notice, but fairly short notice. He wasn't the original opponent, I believe. And yet he went in there and he looked like he was the A side. He looked like he was the original opponent, as it were. Joaquin Buckley. Let me just double check. Yeah. Cancelled fights. There's a lot more on Tapology than I remember. Yeah. Sean Brady versus Vicente Luque was the original fight, and that one never went ahead. At the end of the day, he's got the opportunity, Joaquin Buckley, as an unranked guy. He's gone down to compete at welterweight. He's a huge middleweight, and now he's an even bigger welterweight. He's gone down. He's the unranked guy, like I said, and he's grabbed the opportunity with both hands and beaten Vicente Luque with both hands. He put in an absolutely phenomenal performance on Saturday night to finish a guy who isn't traditionally finished all that often. I think he's got one finish loss. Bilal Muhammad, Stephen Thompson, Rocky Edwards. all couldn't finish him. The only person to finish him was Jeff Neal, and that was in the third round. Joaquin Buckley just absolutely battered him on the. He did well in that first round to defend Vicente Luque's sort of hopes for a takedown or hopes to get the fight to the floor. And in that second round, he just came out and he just showed his authority. He showed Vicente Luque no respect, and it showed in the fight because he got the finish. The finish for me was a strange one. The fight made its way to the floor, and Joaquin Buckley landed some big ground and pound. Don't get me wrong, he's got phenomenal power, but Vicente Luque, I wouldn't say that he gave up, but as soon as the referee pulled Joaquin Buckley off, Vicente Luque just got back to his feet and walked around. He wasn't, he's on paper he'd been TKO'd, but he didn't, he almost looked like he gave up in a way. He looked a little bit gun shy in the entire fight, but he almost looked like he didn't fancy it, which is a strange thing to see from Vicente Luque, one of the most entertaining fighters in the welterweight division. But brilliant win for Joaquin Buckley. 3-0 now with 2 finishes at welterweight, including the scalp of Vicente Luque. A huge fight is needed next for Joaquin Buckley because he's got a great backstory. He's a likable personality and he's got the skills. Now we move on to back-to-back controversies. Chris Weidman defeats Bruno Silva by unanimous decision, which the referee actually stepped in to stop the fight after 2 minutes 18 of the third round. Now, Chris Weidman, everybody likes Chris Weidman. Everybody wants Chris Weidman to, I think everybody really wants Chris Weidman to retire with a win. We saw him shoot to fame with those back-to-back wins over Anderson Silva. He then made the defense against Lyoto Machida, made the defense against Vitor Belfort, and since then has picked up 3 wins. That was in 2015. Lost to Luke Rockhold, lost to Yoel Romero, lost to Gegard Mousasi, beat Calvin Gastelum, lost to Jacare Souza, lost to Dominic Reyes, beat Akhmedov, lost to Uriah Hall with the leg break, lost last time out to Brad Tavares, and this time out wins a unanimous decision victory over Bruno Silva. Now let's talk about eye pokes and the controversy around eye pokes. Is it time that the UFC stopped messing around with the gloves? We spoke about it on the podcast, myself and Tim, years ago. Is it time that we've had main event fights stopped because of an eye poke? We've had multiple fights stopped because of eye pokes. We've had multiple fouls committed because of eye pokes. And yet the UFC aren't stepping up and doing anything to combat the eye poke issue. Chris Weidman was winning the fight. The first round was pretty boring. It was a lot of clinch work, a little bit of work on the ground, but mainly Weidman just controlling Bruno Silva up against the fence. It is what it is. That's a legitimate way of fighting. But the second and third round, Chris Weidman repeatedly, I think I counted 3, if you count the last one as 2, 4 separate eye pokes. The fight was stopped twice in the middle of the fight for eye pokes to Bruno Silva. For me, you get 1 hard warning, no eye pokes. I'd even err on the side of the first time that you do it, it's a point deducted. And I'm telling you now, if for every single time that a fighter poked their opponent in the eye, they got a point deducted, we'd eradicate it from the sport. I really disagree with, people, the constant pouring of, with the referee to credit referees, they constantly are saying, fingers to the sky, fingers to the sky. So you can pour with your palm, but you can't pour with your fingers out straight. But it's getting to be a little bit of a joke now. Chris Weidman in particular, he knows the rules. Everybody in the UFC knows the rules of MMA. You don't bite, like we saw last week, and you cannot eye poke amongst others. But talking about eye pokes, you cannot have your fingers extended outwards. So why do fighters get away with it? Every single fight card, we will see at least 1 to 2 eye pokes across a fight. It seriously hindered Bruno Silva in this one, and he was. I can see him appealing this, and I can see it potentially being turned to a no contest. And like I said, everybody likes Chris Weidman. He's a nice guy. I think that he should have either got disqualified or it should be turned into a no contest at the very least. That final, he said, if you get poked in the eye, you can't turn your back, you don't fall to the floor. You've already poked him in the eye twice. His eyes are sensitive anyway. You've poked him in the eye twice. Then you do it a third and a fourth time, leading to the stoppage finish. I want this one, and it's nothing against Chris Weidman, and it's nothing in favor of Bruno Silva. I want this one to go to a no contest. And the same as we saw with Ruziboyev and Dumas. Dumas was poked in the eye. He was bleeding from the eye, I'm pretty sure, when the finish came. Ruziboyev was dominating the fight. There's no two ways about it. But to see back-to-back eye pokes like that and really nothing be done about it, no one come out and said anything about it. I really, really think that we saw, I think, it was in the Julio Arce Herbert Burns fight. Referee Gary Copeland stopped the fight, reviewed it, took a point away from Herbert Burns, I'm pretty sure, for repeated low blows. Why can't that be done with eye pokes? Why can't we stop the action? Was the eye poke, were his fingers out, or was he sort of palmed? Was it an accidental eye poke, or were the fingers out? Now, I'm not saying that every time the fingers are out that you're poking your opponent in the eye on purpose, but what I do feel is that if your fingers are out and you poke your opponent in the eye, it's a point deductive. If your fingers are up and for somehow the eye, goes in the fingers, that's accidental. Review it. If the fingers are out and there's an eye poke, take a point. If fingers are up, it's accidental. 5 minutes to recover, like we do now. It's getting beyond a joke. That's my little rant for today's episode. Moving further down the card, Kyle Nelson knocks out Bill Algeo. Really good finish, killer instincts. Bill Algeo was calling Kyle Nelson on. Kyle Nelson just welcomed a newborn baby into the world and gets a finish victory. Really, really good. Good performance from him. I'm going to come back. Well, actually, no, I'll talk about it now. Reece McKee versus Chidi Njokuani. Strange fight for me. It's a very strange fight. Split decision win for Njokuani. Reece McKee still without a win in the UFC. He's now 0-4, I believe. He got TKO by Khamzat, and then he's lost 3 on the bounce now. Will he get another chance? I'm just not sure. Maybe with Reece McKee, he's just not UFC caliber. He's in that horrible place at the moment where he's too good for Cage Warriors. He picks up multiple wins in Cage Warriors. I'm not sure if he's ever lost in Cage Warriors. But he's just not quite UFC. Don't get me wrong, the guys that he's fighting to are some of the best guys in the world. Yeah, he's got 2 losses outside of the UFC. To Tim Barnett in 2017 on a BAMMA card, and another loss on a BAMMA card to Terry Brazier. But he picked up 3 wins in Cage Warriors, joins the UFC, 2 losses, goes back to Cage Warriors, 3 finish victories, goes back to the UFC, 2 decision losses. He's in that weird sort of purgatory state at the moment where he just can't seem to pick up a UFC win, which is devastating for Reece McKee. But not everyone is cut out for the UFC, unfortunately. Reece McKee for me is a Bellator to PFL level fighter, where he's not good enough for the UFC, but he's too good for the regional scene, the sort of lower level international scene like Cage Warriors. He would thrive in Bellator with his Irish roots as well. I think Bellator is the place for Reece McKee. Nate the Train, performance of the night, phenomenal comeback victory. He pretty much knocked down in the first 10 to 15 seconds of the fight against Jamal Emmons. Rallies, he's bloody. He rallies, lands a beautiful uppercut to a knockout for Nate the Train. I'm going to come back to talk about the Jandy Rober versus Lupi Godinez fight. Julio Arce, TKO's Herbert Burns. Very strange fight, this. Herbert Burns is a very strange fighter, and I think he's probably going to be cut from the UFC now. He had 2 years away after he was TKO'd for exhaustion. against Bill Algeo. This fight, he takes on Julio Arce, low blows him twice. I think that was in the first round. He low blows him twice intentionally. They were intentional low blows. He didn't keep the knee up, as it were. Got the point deducted, and then with TKO'd in the second round. Herbert Burns for me it's a strange fighter. He started his UFC career with 2 straight wins. He knocked out Nate Landwehr actually, and submitted Evan Dunham. He then lost to Daniel Pineda, KO. Lost to Bill Algeo, technically a KO, a TKO, sorry, and then was KO'd last on Saturday night by Herbert Burns. It's done for Herbert, but sorry, by Julio Arce. It's done for Herbert Burns in the UFC. Dennis Buzukja, Dennis the Great, big knockout, performance of the night, winning knockout at flyweight, and this is not something that we often see from flyweights. He really needed a win. He obviously lost his last two to Sean Woodson and to Jamal Emmers. Sorry, that was at featherweight, not at flyweight. Yeah, featherweight, my bad. But even so, regardless of what weight, it was a really, really good knockout win. Big overhand. We had the fight of the night with Ibo Aslan and Anton Turkali. I can't. Yeah, you guys know that I'm awful at pronouncing names. That was a really fun fight. Like I said, go back and watch it. Jacob Malkoun versus Andrei Petroski was one of the strangest knockouts I've ever seen. Petroski shot him for a takedown. I'm not quite sure what happened. He then sort of backed away like his equilibrium had gone, like he was wobbled. And Jacob Malkoun followed up with a few shots, which is absolutely fair, and got the TKO victory. He followed up with that massive body kick as well, which is perfectly legal. Kick to the body to a downed opponent. But I'm not quite sure where Andrei Petroski got hurt, got injured. Yeah, I really go back and watch it because I can't even explain. I'm struggling to explain how he actually was rocked or was injured. I simply as simple as this, I don't know. Go back and watch it. And Kyle Loughran picked up his first UFC victory after losing his debut with an absolute dominant win over Angel Pacheco. Angar Pacheco, 3 takedowns, 140 total strikes, 148 total strikes, 140 significant strikes, battered the leg, mixed it well with takedowns. Really, really good work, ripping to the body and to the head, double jab right hands. Loughran called out Raul Rosas. Absolutely signed me up for that. I really like that guy. 30-27 on all scorecards, and he's finally back in the win column. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the Lupi Godinez versus Vinra Jandiroba fight. This was, for me, quite strange. I scored this in favour of Lupi Godinez, and the reason for that is she did the far better work on the feet. I don't think any exchanges on the ground it's very, very difficult to score the exchanges on the ground because the women were pretty much in a 50-50 position for a lot of the exchanges on the ground. But Jandiroba, she did land more takedowns, I guess. But Lupi Godinez, I think, did the far more damage. Submission attempts for submission attempts' sake, I don't think should be scored. She did have that rear naked choke in the third round. She was riding the back in the third round. Lupi Godinez, I think, is going to be a little bit frustrated with the outcome of this one because she was riding. Last year it was a phenomenal year for her. She was riding a really good winning run. But with the greatest respect to Jandiroba, she is miles off the top of the division, skill for skill. You obviously got the champion Zhang Weili. She's competing, in a couple of weeks' time against Yang Xiaonan, the number one contender. You've got Tatiana Suarez ranked number 2, Amanda Lemos ranked number 3, and Jessica Andrade ranked number 4. I think Vera Jandiroba, it'll be hard to deny her a title shot if she wins another fight or two. I'm not sure what her win streak is at the moment. Let me just double check. But she is so she's on a 3-fight win streak. She beat Angela Hill by unanimous decision, Marina Rodriguez by unanimous decision, and obviously now Lupi Godinez by unanimous decision. In my humble opinion, and no disrespect to Jandiroba, she is so far off the top of the division. She could potentially be, if she gets a title shot against Zhang Weili, if she gets the title shot against Yan Xiaonan, depending on who wins next in a couple of weeks, she will probably be the biggest underdog in UFC history, because I just, with, it sounds like I'm being disrespectful. I just don't think she's very good. The girls that she's beaten, she's out grappled. She's not out grappling any of the two women that I just discussed. She lost to Cara Esparza, she lost to Mackenzie Dern, she lost to Amanda Ribas. It's a difficult sell for me to get her anywhere near a title shot, but it is what it is. But moving on to doing, as we all know, I'm not a massive fan of doing, really in-depth previews. I'd rather review the fight nights that were, or the shows that were. But moving on, we've got a pretty decent, like I said last week, I'm getting a little bit sick of mundane, boring UFC fight night cards. This is not that. Main event, we've got a rematch. We've got someone enjoying a really big winning streak in Brendan Allen, and someone who has, he's slightly flattered to deceive in recent times in Chris Curtis. The co-main event is very exciting with Alexander Hernandez and Damon Jackson. We've got Ignacio Bahamundes, one of my favorite fighters, on the card as well. Court McGee, Alex Morono, Legends fight. We've got a really pivotal fight, which is for some reason right down on the prelims at women's bantamweight, between Norma Dumont and Jermaine Durandamy, returning, of course, after a long time out. Cynthia Calvillo's on the card, and personal, favorite of mine, someone that I would actually regard as quite a good friend, Melissa No Mess Mullins, returns, looking to go 7-0 against Nora Cornell. But in the main event, like I said, Brendan Allen looks to avenge his loss against Chris Curtis. The two guys faced off. Let me just double check when it was. They faced off December 2021. So we're talking, 2.5 years ago almost. And Chris Curtis won the fight by knees and punches, knockout in the second round. I'll totally honest, I haven't watched that fight back. I'll watch it back later this week. But since then, Brendan Allen has been on a 6-fight winning streak, of which 5 of those wins have come via rear naked choke. Since that fight, like I said, Chris Curtis, let me just double check. 2021. See, this is the problem when he's extremely active. Has gone 3-2 and 1 no contest. He beat Rodolfo Vieira, beat Joaquin Buckley by finish, and he beat Marc-André Barrio last time out via split decision. He lost to Calvin Gastelum, he lost to Jack Hermansson, and he went to a no contest due to an accidental clash of heads with Nasruddin Imanov. This is a fight that I'm really excited for. If Brendan Allen can get it to the floor, I genuinely think that he taps him out pretty soon. But as we saw last time, he suffered the knockout at the hands of Chris Curtis. Just looking at the stats from the last fight, Brendan Allen wasn't able to take the fight to the floor. He attempted 3 times and was unsuccessful in all of them. Like I said, I haven't watched the fight. It says knees to body from clinch for a finish. I'm picking Brendan Allen in this one to go 7-0 in it since losing to Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis is taking it on short notice, but Brendan Allen is, in my opinion, extremely, extremely legit. He's headlined twice against Andre Muniz on short notice, but then against Paul Craig last time out, and he submitted Paul Craig. Massive. That's massive. Alexander Hernandez versus Damon Jackson. 2 pretty experienced guys now. Damon Jackson coming off 2 losses. Alexander Hernandez coming off 1. Not quite sure why it's the co-main event, but it is what it is. Got quite an exciting fight between, I'm going to butcher these names, so bear with me, Chepel Mariscal and Morgan Charrier? The Last Pirate. What a nickname. Anyway, Cage Warriors champion coming into the UFC, finished his first fight via body kick, which earned him a performance of the night bonus. He's taking on Machine Gun. Again, I do apologize for the butchering, but Machine Gun is 2-0 in the UFC. He won his last fight by TKO due to an arm injury for his opponent. Ignacio Bahamundes returns. Like I said, one of my favorite fighters to watch. He entered the UFC from the Contender Series. He lost his first fight by split decision. He then wheel kicked Roosevelt Roberts out cold. He secured a Bravo choke against Rong Zhu, beat Trey Ogden via decision, and then lost last time out to Ludwig Klein by decision. He takes on Christos Garagos, 34 years old now, lost his last fight by sub. Um, it's a for me, it's a bit of a setup for Bahamundes to probably get a submission victory, hopefully, but we'll see. But I'm just going to comment on the two, excuse me, on the two women's fights on the card. Or two of the women's fights on the card. Norma Dumont versus Jermaine Durandamy. Norma Dumont has never made 135 from my understanding, and this is a fight at 135. She could potentially be the next contender at 135. Yep, so she was scheduled for a bantamweight bout. She debuted at featherweight, obviously made featherweight. She was then scheduled for a bantamweight bout against Ashley Evans Smith. Won that fight, but came in at 139 pounds. She was scheduled against Erin Blanchfield, and she weighed in at 139 pounds again. That fight was cancelled. And then she was scheduled to face Macy Chiasson at featherweight back in May 2022 and missed featherweight, 146.5 pounds. Since then, she beat Danielle Wolf, Carla Rosa, and Chelsea Chandler. She's looked good. She has looked good. She has looked good in recent times, Norma Dumont. And, at 33 years old, she could potentially be looking at being the next bantamweight contender. My issue with it is that, she's ranked number 11. She's taking on Jermaine Durandamy, who's not in the rankings at the moment because of, obviously she stepped away to have a baby, from my understanding, Jermaine Durandamy. Jermaine Durandamy is 39 years old. She's coming off a win against a former champion, Juliana Pena, but this will be the first time that we see her in the octagon in almost 4 years. What has she got left? She stepped away from the sport when she was 35. She's now 39. She's going in there against a girl who's been competing a lot. Norma Dumont has been active in more recent times. She's competed twice last year. She was scheduled to face Yana Santos in January of this year. The one fell off. So she's now facing Jermaine Durandamy. What does that mean? Is she coming in with more, is she going to be sharper? I think so. And opening up the card, like I said, someone that I regard as a good friend, Melissa No Mess Mullins. She's from my neck of the woods in Coventry, England. She's undefeated, 6-0. She's 1-0 in the UFC. She beat Irina Alexeyeva on her UFC debut back in October. She has, excuse me, she, she doesn't know what it's like to taste defeat, which is a very, very dangerous prospect. And I like the way Melissa's thinking heading into this fight. She's saying, she's not saying, she's counting down the days, and she's not saying that it's, 1 week until fight night. She's saying it's 1 week until I go 7-0. She's got a new team. I think it's Faber Jiu Jitsu. She's training with the guys over in Birmingham at Renegade. Obviously, Leon Edwards and Fabian Edwards train out of there. So, that's not a bad gym to be training with. She's training with the likes of Lexi Rook, Veronica Macedo. She's got the mind of Dan Hardy there often as well. For my liking, Melissa is a real prospect. She has got a difficult test in Nora Cornell. 7-1, is on a 7-fight win streak. But if you look at the level of her last 2 fights, Cornell, she's a striker. She's a Muay Thai girl, and Melissa will probably look to get this one to the floor. She's got, she's an elite jiu-jitsu competitor at bantamweight. Cornell went the distance with Jocelyn Edwards in her debut, won that one, but she's got a win over Hasna Gaber, who has no business being I watched Hasna Gaber fight Dakota Ditcheva live in London. Dreadful. She was dreadful, and then she won by a leg injury. So it is what it is. Of course, I'm backing Melissa Mullins. I really think that she'll get it done. I think she'll get it done in a pretty dominant way. To be honest, I can see a pretty dominant decision victory, or even, you know, a TKO late. If you want to learn a little bit more about Melissa, I spoke to her. I interviewed her a couple of months ago because I didn't want to, you know, get too involved with her schedule. I'll drop the link in the bio below. It's a really good interview, and you know, it's well worth a listen. But moving on, I'm just going to quickly touch on the PFL season. 2024 season starts this weekend. This is it Friday night, Thursday night. Starts this Thursday night. Headlined by Ante Delaja versus Valentin Moldovsky. Delaja obviously is a you know a stalwart of the PFL scene. Moldovsky making his what I believe is, you know, it will be his PFL debut. Yeah, you know, he I think he's the former heavyweight. I think he competed for the he competed for the undisputed heavyweight championship in Bellator. He lost to Ryan Bader. That's a great fight. Linton Vassell versus Denis Goltsov. This is very much Bellator versus PFL. And we've got the Bellator 125-pound champion Liz Carmouche. She's, I think, having a trilogy. Yeah, she's having a trilogy bout with Juliana Velasquez. Obviously, Carmouche has finished Velasquez twice now, back to back. That's a massive fight because, you know, you're knocking out probably one of the two favorites for the flyweight tournament. We've got Tyrell Fortune versus Daniel James. I'm going to come on to touch on the Dakota Ditcheva fight in a minute. We've got Blagoy Ivanov making his PFL debut versus Sergey Bilosteny. Talia Santos making her PFL debut. We've just got it's a really good card, but there's a lot of, for my liking, there's a lot of competitive women's fights. You've got Watanabe versus Shanna Young. I think that's a really good fight. You've got Jenna Bishop, undefeated Jenna Bishop, 6-0. Jenna Bishop, she takes on the 4-1-1 Chelsea Hackett. Hackett obviously lost on the Contender Series, the UFC Contender Series, but then won her PFL debut by rear naked choke last time out. Like I said, Talia Santos makes her PFL debut against Ilia Joanne. Joanne coming off 2 straight losses, so you know Talia Santos probably going to be the big heavy favorite in that one. And then we've got the return of the PFL Europe flyweight champion Dakota Ditcheva, 10-0. Like I said, I spoke to her. You know, I spoke to her a couple of years ago now. She's got 8 wins by knockout, 1 win by submission, 1 win by decision. She finished all of her PFL Europe fights last year. She finished every fight that she's had in the PFL. And we honestly thought, everyone thought that with her stepping into the regular season, that it was going to be a massive step up in competition. Unfortunately, that is not what we've got. We've got Dakota Ditch versus Lisa Muldoon. Muldoon is 6-3. She's okay, Muldoon. She's never beaten anyone of any ability, with the greatest respect. She, like I said, she's 6-3. She has won her last 2 straight on the PFL Challenger Series, and then she won a showcase fight against Desiree Yanez. She also won a boxing match last time out against Angel Blackwell, is what it is. Dakota will run through her opponent. But then hopefully we'll get a really competitive fight for Dakota after that. But in a nutshell, make sure you watch the PFL on Thursday. Make sure you tune into the UFC next week. I'm going to look at recording 2 shows next week. I'm going to record a quick review of the week, and then obviously I'm going to record the mega preview for UFC 300. It's all on the countdown now for UFC 300. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Don't forget, use code SUCKA, SUCKA, at manscaped.com for 20% off. Free worldwide shipping all the way. You know, you get free worldwide shipping to Paris, the home of the next flyweight contender, Manon Fiorot. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll catch you next time.